How does one plan a life if they aren't sure they will have a life to plan? Trayvon, Rashonda Anderson,
Deborah Daniels,
Megan Flagg,
Jeremiah
Hall,
Michelle
Stephanie
Lee,
Clark,
Megan
Lashanda
George Floyd. His name was George Floyd. Say his name. Say his name.
George Floyd. Say his name.
Say their names. Once again, and always, we fight for justice.
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
Rest in power, beautiful. You didn't deserve this.
The Cuvée Group is a Florida-based marketing and training consulting firm. We help businesses communicate to their target audience and engage them in conversation. We also help to expand their audiences, which will ultimately result in growth for those organizations. In addition to being a certified constant contact specialist, my colleagues and I are also certified in John Maxwell Leadership Principles. We use these proven principles to conduct workshops, training, and private coaching sessions for individuals and companies looking to take things to the next level. Contact us to schedule a free consultation. Issues today, don't delay, call Cuvée.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earth Blend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earth Blend Coffee.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids' apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
YT Productions.
Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won. I hope my team they won. Yeah, man. I hope my team they won. I hope my team they won. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with this hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson. And you gon' learn today, how your team they play, how they play, boy. You gon' learn today, how your team they play, how they play, yeah. We represent that swag, that MEAC, and let me say, what's up to Tennessee State, You're tuned into the HBCU Sports Lab with Dr. Cavil, Mike and Charles.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop, in the 150th episode of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show and podcast. The show that's covering and sporting HBCU dash for all things HBCU sports, institutions large and small, from NAIA to the NCAA. We share insights and information on the HBCU sports culture and HBCU athletic aesthetics. We facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs and the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, along with my co-host, Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. We're filming from our home studios and sending a signal live to KSUH 1230 AM studios with Texas Radio Hall of Famer Ralph Cooper in the beautiful home of Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas. I wonder if Ralph Cooper is still celebrating his birthday. You know how Ralph Cooper do it. It might be a whole week-long festivities in terms of all that want to make sure that they pay homage to his birthday.
It better be.
Yeah, Ralph may be somewhere still in Third Ward. I don't know.
Sunnyside.
Only if you didn't have to do the show and make sure that we was on with, you know, he would be all over the place. But he probably came from Third Ward, that's for sure. If he not there right now, he probably was there earlier today making his rounds as he gets it done. Shout out to the birthday boy this whole weekend, this whole week as he does his thing. With that, Mike, I see you got your Prairie View shirt on. You know what? Anything you trying to make a statement or what's going on?
Oh, no. Prairie View just came out with their little package for homecoming. So all the emails are flying. All the text mails are going by. RV sales are going up, at least in the state of Texas. So kudos to the Prairie View A&M, especially homecoming tailgate.
Did you go the Prairie? Okay, all right.
That's why I said the Prairie View. I'm gonna name it and claim.
The D on it. Heard this. I was gonna let it go by there, but I see how we're doing it now. DTHEE, D Prairie View, D Texas Southern University. I hope one of y'all brand some of this stuff so you get paid for these new names y'all putting together because people are running with it. Let me go. Right? Exactly. Let me go to Charles Bishop. You know, I had to throw a little bit of the business side of it in there. Just make sure everybody know we keep it 100. Charles, how you doing today?
Doing pretty well, Dr. Cavil. Congratulations. Episode 150. Definitely want to say that. Definitely want to send out a special early pre-birthday shout out to Wendy Jenkins Bishop. She's a long-time listener and the better half. So definitely want to say
happy birthday, Wendy Bishop.
Happy birthday to the better half.
No doubt about it. We appreciate everything. With that, I know you wanted to make a tribute, if you would, announcement. So go ahead with that.
Yeah, I want to start off the show and unfortunately start us off on a somber note with the passing of the voice of the world famed Tiger marching band, Mr. Leon Thomas III, and just a personal aside, always a gracious guy whenever I go down to Grambling, always took care of me and really appreciated that, showed me around the landscape, around the press box, especially when I was first starting and things of that nature, gave me some nice helpful tips with regards to my sideline reporting for Texas Southern. So he will be truly missed. He is very much a pioneer, especially when you talk about the voice of the world famed Tiger Marching Band. I tell you what, he's just one of those individuals. When you heard him on the mic, you knew who it was. So, and those PA announcers, they're such an intricate part of the band, whether you're talking about Mr. Leon Thomas, whether you're talking about Larry Chatterbox Hale, Joe Bullard, the voice of the Marching 100, Darren Bedell, the voice of the Southern University Human Jukebox. They make the band go. They're part of the band. So definitely want to send our heartfelt condolences to the Thomas family and Grambling in general.
Many years, Brother Carl, the King of Swing, as he likes to call it, wedding MC in some places, people know him. As you talk about that voice, we'll take a quick moment of silence and then we're going to get into the direct dedication. So quick moment of silence and then we'll get right into the dedication.
When it's time to show and go, we bring the music and the drama. From Main Street to stadium seats, small children point and proclaim with glee, "Mama, there goes that band!" In France, they say, "Le monde célèbre." In Spain, "El mundo famoso." Tokyo, Sakai ni Yumina, Italy, di femme mondiale. From Wall Street to Y'all Street, from Frisco to Maine, Tokyo to Spain, all around the globe and back again. They know our name. We are the World Thing.
With that, very appropriate. Thank you, Charles, for making sure that we did that in the most appropriate manner. Certainly want to make sure we pay our respect to Grambling, all those associated with Grambling. For many people, as they refer to it as the G, even your rivals in a time like this are right there supporting you in so many different ways. So wanted to make sure we did that appropriately. And also to the SWAC and HBCUs. When we talk about the culture and we talk about the family, this is what we mean in many ways. It goes beyond the rivalries that we have, that we dusted up in a most appropriate manner. But with that said, today's episode of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab is sponsored by THG Agency, LLC. THG Agency is a company that provides sporting and educational consulting and data analytics. As we promised, we should get into our interview with Jim Carr coming up in the next segment. But before we get to that, I wanted to go back to Mike and let him give his expression and some things that he wants to see us get into before we get into that interview, which should be most interesting, that it seems like a lot of our listeners are getting ready for. Shout out to Ricky Burden, Reggie Walston, CIAA Thomas White Jr., Tyler Ball, Chuck Hunt, Lonnie Shaw, G. Boone Holly, Craig Crosby, Troy Lamont Coleman, representing those Aggies. I was always giving everybody the most appropriate grief as they try to put the Aggies out of the MEAC. He's like, oh, we're not having it. We still had a bowling team in the MEAC, so now what? I just cracked up with that one. Christopher White. Who else we got on here before I go to Mike? Karen Griffin. And we'll get some more to give some shout out to all those and those that I missed early on the show. You know, it's not because we don't want to make sure that we show you the love to our lab listeners that get it done in so many different ways. Let me go to Mike. What are your thoughts, Mike? What are your thoughts?
Man, I just can't wait to dig deeper into this discussion about name, image, and likeness. I know that's highlighting the show. We've seen several postings. One of the things we did not really have the time to get into is how it impacts private schools versus public schools. There's going to be a difference. How will they accept that? How will they manage that? How will, a Hampton manage through this thing versus, just a FAMU or any other state institution? So this thing, if you unpack it, if it's an onion, it's one of the biggest onions I've ever seen because there are so many layers. I started pulling out my law school books for the 2 years of law school I took in dealing with federal versus states' rights. Who trumps who? Who has jurisdiction? You're dealing with gambling. You're dealing with interstate commerce or interstate business. And then you're dealing with regional regulation. So I can't wait to get into this. It is a very, very deep onion, and I can't wait till we start unpeeling all of the layers of this onion.
Oh, man, you're fascinating when you get into the points and you shape it like that, because you're right. There's so many different angles. We had a great bit of conversation, not just on the show, but afterwards, where I got to dig in it, and people will say and bring it back. Like I said, we'll get it from a different perspective, from NAIA. It started this a little early, but then we'll get in a chance maybe to get into some more other parts of this as well, because I'm fascinated of what that looks like when you talk about. There's another case that you need to keep on your mind that's out there too, as you talk about this in some ways, that is right on the heels, and you'll probably continue to see more that will give some more indication of what that looks like. So fascinating when you think about those. Shout out to Courtney Flowers, Dr. Courtney Flowers, my colleague at Texas Southern University, talking about keep your eyes on this. she's on top of it. We'll be able to get her in here and give you an even bigger perspective of that name, image, and likeness in different components that she sees it comes through. She's quietly been on the scene researching and doing a lot of work about where this may or may not go for various different reasons. So that may be somebody that we need to consider with that. Let me go back to you, Charles. What else is on your mind in terms of taking a deeper dive of what you want to consider around the table at this time?
Yeah, I mean, as we're talking about name, image, and likeness, I'm all curious about the companies that can sprout up, that are set up to do business on the behalf of the athletes with regards to name, image, and likeness. So I'm looking forward to, you know, where is this industry going? What is exactly going to happen? And you know, at the end of the day, our question is, how will HBCUs benefit, or can they benefit? So, you know, those are the things that, you know, we really are, like Mike said, it's a big onion, and we're going to be peeling for a second or two.
Yeah, you're absolutely right when you talk about that big onion of what's nexus, where to go from there in so many different ways. Let me see if I can find that particular case I was referencing. Yeah, there's a case by Ralph Trey Johnson, Trey in quotes in terms of his nickname, versus the NCAA, the National Collegiate Athletics. And as stated in this order, which is a civil action number 195230, to be exact, that says, and now the 21st day of June 2021, it is hereby ordered that the parties shall file supplemental memoranda addressing the Supreme Court's opinion in the National Collegiate Athletic Association versus Alston. That's the one that just came out that we all talked about. U.S. numbers 2512, 2520, 2021, WL 2519036, June 21st, 2021, no later than July 6, 2021. So right on top of that, in terms of this case, this is the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania that is looking into this case. This is another one that you see the continued push. You also had the NCAA president come on talking about July 1st, that he will have some information out there in regards to provide some guidelines. So this is fast and furious in so many different ways. So keep your eyes plugged, keep you tight. We'll keep you on top of this in regards to what is coming up, what different directions, and as Charles alluded to, how in many ways this will or will not affect HBCUs. How do you stay on top of it with the smaller businesses that are out there lining themselves up to be able to support, some of them obviously to take advantage of college athletes and how they move forward. So those are some things that you want to be mindful of in terms of what that looks like, in terms of the changing landscape of college sports as we know it ever to be. With that, let's continue to move forward. Obviously, you didn't get into this much, but you had a conversation, an interview with Nate Newton doing, if you would, Deion Sanders' pro preparation. So I just want you to go in a little deeper in that and see what that looks like.
Yeah, I had a great conversation with Nate Newton, and you know, he was very hands-on in terms of being at Coach Prime's camp. But one of the things that, you know, he implored with in the interview was that how high school players have to really be prepared nowadays, especially with regards to the college transfer portal. So they have to come in and be ready to go from jump, make sure that grades are in order, make sure all those things are in order, because typically you would look and have a high school signing class of about 25. Well, now that's sort of been kind of cut in half when you have transfers coming in. So now you're taking a look at, you know, maybe 10 to 12 scholarships that might be available for incoming seniors. Incoming freshmen. So, you know, he really implored parents to, you know, really help their kids be on top of every little thing in regards to getting prepped to play on the next level.
Great point. With that, let's go to our first break. Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. As we come back from the break, we will have none other than the president of the NAIA, Jim Carr, providing us some framework of how he sees name, image, and likeness. They've already entered into that world, so it'll be fascinating to get his perspective. Stick with us. We'll be right back for a great interview.
I'll be looking at the moon, and I'll be seeing you.
Q Time is a classic Atlanta soul food restaurant located in the historic West End. Q Time Soul Food is a family business started by Fred and Christine Crenshaw. Come on in, relax, and sink your chops into our tantalizing, mouth-watering, distinctive soul food with a twist, the Q Time way. 1120 Ralph David Abernathy Boulevard, or call your order in at 404-758-2881. Do you miss your mama's cooking? Then come on down to Q Time, an Urban Passport member.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Watson, Charles Bishop. Well, I tell you, you should get a chance to come behind the scene and get some of the conversation off Mike. It is always fun and fascinating, but not to belabor the point for our special episode 150. We got none other than Mr. Jim Carr. He is the president of the NAIA. Let me give you just a little bit of the background for those that may not know. Mr. Jim Carr joined the NAIA in July 1998 as the managing director and general counsel and was promoted to the chief operating officer while retaining the title of general counsel in 2000. In September 2006, Carr became the 7th president and chief executive officer of the NAIA. And we'll get a chance maybe to go a little deeper in terms of that background. But welcome to the show, President Carr.
Good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
No problem about it. Before we jump too far in it, tell a little bit more about your background, where you're from, and maybe how you got into managing from an administrative perspective college sports.
Yeah, sure. I was born and raised in Gulfport, Mississippi. Went to Millsaps College up in Jackson, and coming out of, I played basketball at Millsaps and knew that small college athletics in general, been a big part of my life at that point, and wanted to continue it. And I really didn't know what to do after college, but I had heard about this master's program up at UMass. At the time, I'm dating myself, back in the 80s, there weren't a lot of sport management programs out there, but UMass had a graduate program, so I was fortunate enough to get in up there. And then after that, I went to UNLV back in the Jerry Tarkanian days and worked in the athletic department. And that was a great first job out of college, but I knew that at some point I wanted to go to law school, so I ended up going to Duke. I guess somewhat ironically, the year I was leaving, Duke and UNLV played in the Final Four, and Duke beat the UNLV undefeated team. So I headed off to Duke, but was still a UNLV fan at that point, and didn't make a lot of friends because of that. But it was a good transition, and had a great time at Duke, and then ended up practicing law for a while, but eventually knew I wanted to put the two together, and fortunate enough to start at the NAIA in 1998, like you described, and never thought I'd be there 23 years, but still sitting there today.
Thank you for that. Before we get into the real business, to lighten it up just a little bit, tell us a good story. You said UNLV with Coach Tarkanian. Tell us a little bit about that experience. Do you have any good stories that you can lean on and kind of share with us that you think make
trying to
you
decide which ones I can say publicly.
Right.
I won't say which player it was, but I was an intern when I first started out there, and I was told by my boss, I worked in the fundraising development department, that it was back in the days of VCRs, and he told me, I think I've been there 3 or 4 weeks, and he said, today I need you to go down to this store. You're going to pick up a VCR and you're going to go deliver it to player A. And so I knew if a guy was an intern in the lowest rung of the totem pole was being asked to do those kinds of things, it was definitely the wild, wild west. And that was just a small thing, I'm sure, compared to some other stuff that was going on. But Coach Tarkanian he really loved his players, but he didn't love the NCAA, so he was just going to do whatever it took to try to bring in some winners.
I love it. I love it. Well, one thing that we really talk about, and when we get into the shows, a lot of times we talk about the history and culture of HBCU sports, but uniquely, we also talk about the business side of college sports in general. The NAIA, for our HBCU fans, most of them realize, but the NAIA was the first organization, association, if you would, that opened the door to HBCU programs back in the 50s. And so I'm sure you're proud of that history. But also a lot of that is about NAIA being nimble. And everything I can read about your background is about being nimble, being able to understand where the world is going to. And so I'm fascinated about the strategy, the tactics, and understanding innovation about how you were able to get the presidents and chancellors within your respective institutions to understand the changing landscape and get ahead of this. The NAIA became the first college sports organization to pass name, image, and likeness legislation back last October. And that has been quiet, much too quiet, to my opinion, and why we wanted to get an opportunity to get this on to really tell that story in many different ways. So if you can share with us why that happened and why is that important?
Yeah, and maybe I'll start just real quick if we have a couple minutes just to talk for a second about integrating college basketball, essentially. And NAIA is just extremely proud of that. The story, as I was told, and I was actually told this by the opportunity to visit with John Wooden about this. Coach Wooden was in Indiana State back in the late 40s, and he had a student athlete on his team named Clarence Walker, happened to be black, and they had a great season. And 1948, got invited to the NAIA tournament, qualified for it, but Kansas City was not an integrated town at that point, and it was not an integrated basketball tournament. And so Coach Wooden, no surprise to anyone, said, well, if Clarence can't participate, then my team's not coming. And that was an unfortunate thing for the NAIA at that point. But fast forward to the next year, essentially the same thing happened. And fortunately, the NAIA leaders and the people of Kansas City had done a lot of work to make sure that they would be in a position to integrate the tournament the next year. So John Wooden and his student athlete Clarence Walker were the first. They were the reason that we were able to integrate college basketball in 1949 in that tournament. And then, as you mentioned, Dr. Cavil, a few years later, HBCUs came in as members, and John McClendon had a great run with the Tennessee State teams back in the late 50s. And I had a chance to meet Coach McClendon too, just one of the best people I've ever met. And so that's just some proud history of the NAIA. And so I thought your folks might be interested in that. But I also think it's important because it does make us want to try to figure out other ways where we can be innovative and different and be a little bit ahead of things, as you said, on the cutting edge. And so we've been talking about relaxing restrictions around NIL for 4 or 5 years now. And we started back with doing some things to allow student athletes to, just things that we kind of looked at and said, even though we've been doing this way for a long time, it just doesn't make sense. Why can't, if a family at a NAIA school wants to do something simple like bake cookies for the team or to take a couple of students out to dinner, it's against the rules. And we kept scratching our heads saying that just doesn't make sense. And so, so we continued to kind of chip away at that. And then about a year and a half ago, the last restriction was student athletes couldn't promote themselves as being students. So if you're a Jarvis Christian and you're a basketball player, and in the summer you want to give shooting lessons to kids in your community, you couldn't say, I'm a basketball player at Jarvis Christian, come take lessons from me. You would have to leave the Jarvis Christian part out of it. And that, again, just didn't make sense to us. And so that was the last restriction that went away. So now, essentially, the way we try to put it is student athletes are now in a similar position to any other student with talent. So if you're a good trumpet player, you can give trumpet lessons and market yourself in any way you want. So if you're a basketball player, you should be able to do the same thing. And so it's been great so far. I would have to admit, we don't have some of the challenges that NCAA Division I has with,
That's right.
Texas or Alabama or somebody's going to line up all 85 football players and the donor's going to give them 10 grand. That's not going to happen at an NAIA school. So we did have that going for us as well. But part of it was you just get into, because of that and the reasons I was talking about before, there's just no reason to not do this. And so we move forward with it, and the world hasn't come to an end. Everything seems to be going okay. And we have schools asking a lot of questions, and how can we restrict as an institution what our students can do? And we try to tell them, just like if you don't want any student to wear something obscene on a T-shirt, or you don't want them drinking on campus, you can come up with whatever restrictions and rules you want, but the NAIA is not going to prohibit student athletes from trying to go out and make some money. And most of our students are making money to help pay the bills. There's not many NAIA student athletes are getting full scholarships. It's really a way to help pay for the cost of education.
Makes sense. I really appreciate the way you dug into that, both on the history and then wrapping around as you start to chart the course moving forward. If you would, let Charles jump in and ask a follow-up question.
Sure. Well, I wanted to ask whether the NCAA has come to the NAIA in the form, I guess, of or the NAIA should say, come to the NCAA as a consultant and say, here is a way to do this, or a platform in which you can kind of follow this blueprint in that manner. I know there's it's different with regards to their rules and regulations, but is there a framework that the NCAA at least can follow in looking at the NAIA?
I think there is, and certainly when you think about the NCAA, there's Division II, Division III, even the smaller Division I schools, I think probably look more like an NAIA school than they do like Alabama or Texas. So I think they can learn a lot from how we're coming at it and what's going on, and we're happy to share all that with them. We haven't had a lot of formal conversations with them about it. I did have a chance a few different times to talk with Val Ackerman. She's one of the co-chairs of the committee that they put together, and Val and I've known each other for a long time. So we just had a few conversations around it. She was saying similar to what you're asking, Charles, just asking me, how have you been able to get this done, and what problems or challenges have you faced in doing it? And so I think, again, if they didn't have the complexities of Division I, they may have already headed in that direction. Although they're I don't think this is a secret to anybody. They're pretty bureaucratic, and they're not very quick to change. So even without that, I'm not sure they would have gotten there quite yet.
Sure.
Great point. Mike, jump in here and ask a follow-up question, President Carr.
Yes, my question is of a little different nature. And again, thanks for coming on. You've seen the news flashes of the Supreme Court and their rulings, with retrospect to, or with reference to the NCAA. How do you think, or from your standpoint, how does this impact recruiting? And do you see a paradigm shift in recruiting changes once this the layers of this onion start unraveling, and you start to see more and more regulations, some of which may be even state specific? Once they're in place, do you see this really impacting recruiting and, the transfer portal? And if so, in what way?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine it will, and I think it'll be different at each different level. But I think, coaches in particular are going to need to be creative and then supported by their administrations to say, what is it that our institution is willing to do? I've been saying for quite a while now that, it'll be different, but in some ways it's very similar in that, right now institutions can build great new facilities, and they can do a lot of things to recruit students. They can have great, provide great meals and things, but they just can't give them money. And so that's where schools are pouring in all their resources to try to win that battle, locker rooms, other things like that. And so I think now people are creative, they're smart, they'll figure out ways to now try to and you're already seeing a lot of the big schools sign deals with some of the different consultants or partners out there that are in this business. So I think they'll try to position themselves to say, if you come to University of Houston, we have this kind of program, so you can help build your brand and endorse certain items. I think the rules will be such that the University of Houston couldn't actually act as an agent or a broker, but they can do a lot to connect them with donors and things like that who might be willing to help them with their brand or with any other ways they might be able to earn a little bit extra money. But that kind of gets to the crux of the issue. Some some people are scared to death of that, and others are saying we should embrace it and move forward. And I'm more in the latter camp, but I know it's going to cause some issues. But people have figured out a free market in a lot more complicated industries than this one. So I think we can figure it out over time.
Sure.
Yep. No doubt about it. Jim, if you stick with us, we're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
Ask a couple more questions, and we'll let you have the rest of your evening. We really appreciate your time. This is Dr. Bill inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. We're interviewing the NAIA President, Jim Carr. We'll be right back after this quick break. Stick with us.
Before we can safely come together, we need the facts on COVID-19 vaccines. Visit GetVaccineAnswers.org so you can make an informed decision for yourself and for your family.
This is Ryan Fulford. AD Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN Sports Lab. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Lab, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show. Support the Black College Sports Network so we can continue to provide you coverage. Go to myjbn.com/support and be a part of the Black College Sports Network.
They can follow their dreams.
This is Dr. Bill inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Hope you're enjoying our interview with the president of the NAIA, Jim Carr. Wanted to take it off the script a little bit and ask you more of a philosophical question, because you touched on this to some degree. I'm always fascinated. I happen to be a professor at Texas Southern University, developed their sport management program, and I saw on your bio sketch that you have an MS in sport management. You talked about Millsaps College, BBA in business administration. So obviously that natural connection. And then your JD at Duke University. Don't want to get the Duke people out there upset, so we want to make sure we throw that in there. But with that being said, when you have these connections like this, you talked about, you know, somebody that played the trumpet or a musician, if you would, if they had an opportunity to get a gig or whatever you wanted to, or teach some people about music, no problem. But in athletics, it's different until the NAIA jumped in there, and now you see maybe the NCAA being nudged and pushed to have to go in that direction. Different conversation there. But what are your thoughts in terms of the academy? The academy has majors in music, and you have things that are called like a BA, if you would, in dance or other different types of arts. But you don't really see that on the sporting side. We've crushed over for the business, as you said, in sport management. What would your thought on how would you germinate possibly schools at some point maybe looking at literally creating majors in the artistic part of sports, whether it's basketball or football? Have you had a chance to think about that a little?
Yeah, and I, to my knowledge, the only institution or place that's really doing some of that is the, I believe I have the name right, but the U.S. Sports Academy down there in Mobile.
Yeah.
I know they work with a lot of coaches and degrees, but it, personally, at least in my dealings in NAIA, I don't see a lot of folks coming into coaching from there, but I, of course, don't know all of our coaches' backgrounds. But I have been surprised to your question that we aren't seeing more of that. You said, you know, if somebody wants to go to, you know, somewhere and really pursue dance or pursue these other things, you know, I don't know if maybe that's a little bit what we're getting to with again, I'm blanking on the name of I know a group that is trying to lure the top 30 high school prospects to come in and they're not eligible yet for an NBA, but they're going to go there. And I think it's going to be mostly just try to get better at basketball. And so that could be some version of that. It's not exactly the same thing as what you talked about because it's not connected to an institution of higher ed, but we may see something like that where maybe it's within the NCAA or the NAIA that students could come in and just if they want to pursue professional sports, if they think they can go play soccer professionally, that's what they major in. But I think the higher ed community might resist that for reasons that I don't know if they make a lot of sense, but it just doesn't seem like we're headed in that direction right now.
No doubt, no doubt. Mike, did you want to jump back in here with a follow-up question?
Yeah, I want to go back. I know you have a JD from Duke University, and I myself only have 2 years of law school, had to finish the MBA first. So we've talked on and on a couple of times here about how this thing will unravel in the courts. So I want to get your perspective because you see the Supreme Court's ruling, their initial discussions, but in your minds, is this kind of falls in the arena of federal jurisdiction versus states jurisdiction versus interstate commerce. So from a legal perspective, how do you see this playing out and who do you see having more precedence, having more jurisdiction over this issue?
Yeah, I mean, a lot in there, Mike, in terms of different ways you could go with an answer to this, but I think, certainly the NCAA is a proponent of federal legislation. They want, and I certainly agree that it would be easier if there's one piece of federal legislation instead of right now 50 different states, and I don't think any two pieces of state legislation are exactly the same. They certainly have some similarities, but so I think it would be easier for everybody if there was one standard, or maybe if the states still want to pass it, there's like in commercial code, you have a uniform commercial code where each state can do their own thing, but for the most part, each state is very, very similar, so they could go that route as well. I know some folks are working on that, but you mentioned the Supreme Court, the Alston case that was recently decided. It's going to be kind of interesting to see as that plays out, sort of what that means. I mean, the specific decision was really just about that the NCAA can't limit education-related expenses, but I think people are saying that that's just the start. That now that people are going to use that to say, well, the NCAA is really in trouble in terms of all antitrust issues, and so they're not going to be able to limit anything going forward. And if that's the case, then I think it's going to be wide open. And I would think at some point it could be similar to professional sports in the sense that if you want to pay your quarterback, a couple $100,000, that we may get there at some point. Of course, we're not there yet, and the courts haven't said that would be allowed. But it's I think we're headed more towards that direction than we are our limits at this point.
It makes sense to actually get to a point where the players in some form have to form an organization and get into a CBA where you get these collective bargaining agreements in terms of how you deal with college athletes.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, Dr. Cavil. I think that at some point, if we head in that direction, as I just described, I think you would see union and collective bargaining agreements because it's hard enough to come to those kind of agreements with 30 professional teams in a league, but if you have at least 75 or 100 at the top of Division I, those student athletes are going to need some representation in order to figure out what the landscape is.
Wow.
Charles, you want to jump in here with a follow-up?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up with regards to third-party companies, and I wanted to reference the Forbes article that you were mentioning, and there was a company in there mentioned Playbook, and I'm curious with regards to how important will these third-party companies be with regards to, being the intermediary between the athlete and the college, and who will vet these third-party companies? Will it be on the school or the conference?
Yeah, within the NAIA, it's really up to the institution. We're trying our best not to get in the middle of that, not because we don't want to or don't want to help our schools, but we just think they're best placed to decide who they want to partner with in that respect. And if you talk with a lot of these different companies, some of them are trying to do different things. Like some, as you mentioned, are trying to be intermediaries. Some are more representing the student athlete, like Playbook is trying to represent student athletes and find partners for them. I know I talked to a company recently that represents a lot of companies, and then they're going to try to go out and find student athletes who can support the companies that they represent. And then there are others who are more in the compliance business. And I think like Open Doors is an example of that. They want to help the schools try to make sure they're tracking all this and keeping records. And that's something that our schools don't need to nearly the extent that I think Open Doors would come in and be able to serve. Because one, you're not going to have the volume of it, and two, we just aren't requiring a lot of compliance. Again, the schools can put any regulations or rules in it they want. I think from going back, I think it was Mike's question about recruiting. I think schools are likely to try to not put too many restrictions on there. They're going to fear that they're going to give them a recruiting disadvantage if they're seen as a school that's putting up all kinds of roadblocks with either current partners or saying that you can't. It's against our mission if you're going to sponsor Budweiser or whatever it might be. But I know a number of our schools are faith-based, and they don't allow alcohol on campus, so I'm sure they will do some of those kinds of things.
Makes a lot of sense there. The article that you were referencing, Charles, just for our listeners that may want to go read it, is what NIL deals NAIA can tell us about the market. That was written, our contributor was Christy Dosh, that's DOSH, Sports Money in terms of Forbes. Great information you had in that article, why we wanted to reach out to us. Before we close and let you get on with your schedule, I want to give you a chance to talk about some areas that we may not have asked you that you think important that people need to recognize. I know you had the Gold Coast Athletic Conference, HBCUs, Dr. Kiki Baker-Barnes. She's been on the show and told us about her roles of working in that organization. And obviously, you had the Red River Athletic Conference that has both HBCUs and historically white colleges, as we refer to it here. And you mentioned Jarvis Christian, you got Wiley College, Texas College, Paul Quinn, and then you have Langston and the Sooner Athletic Conference, Jarvis Christian College, trying to show out a little bit for you. Make sure you
good knowledge, I like it.
You do give these shout out to Xavier that's moving over to the Red River Athletic Conference. Obviously, you still have Dillard and Landon Smith and etc. over there. But any other thing that you wanted to share with us in terms of that unique space that you're doing at NAIA?
Yeah, as you rattle off all those schools in NAIA, HBCUs have, and I mentioned before about John McClendon's teams back with Tennessee State, but HBCUs have always played an important role within the NAIA, and I think it's incumbent upon us as a national office staff to try to figure out ways that we can better serve HBCUs. We have, I believe, 21 is our current count of HBCUs, but I think some who are in Division II or Division III could thrive even better in the NAIA. But it's up to us to go out and prove that to them and to show why it would be better to be in the NAIA. I mean, you can compete at about half the cost of Division II, and still have great athletics and recruit lots of great students. And so we just need to get the word out and talk to them about that. And I mentioned off the air that Lester Newman, the president of Jarvis Christian, is going to be the chair of our Council of Presidents. So that's one thing that I'm looking forward to working with Lester over the next couple of years to talk with him and his colleagues at those other HBCUs to get them to help me figure out what's the right path to at least to get out and talk to as many HBCUs as possible, tell them the story of the NAIA, and if it's the right fit for them, great. If it's not, we certainly understand that as well. But we're certainly in the business right now of trying to find any HBCUs who are interested in coming in.
No doubt about it. Well, we thank you again for your time. This is Dr. Cavil inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. You've heard our interview with the president of the NAIA, Jim Carr. We thank you so much for your time. Great information, great perspective. Anything that comes up new that you want to share on this platform, you're welcome. You have our contact. Please let us know, and we'll make sure we get you back on. Thank you so much again for your time.
Sounds great. Love to be back with you at some point. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Cavil with Inside HBCU Sports Lab. We'll be right back after this quick break. You just heard our interview close up with the president of the NAIA, Jim Carr, with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Stick with us. We'll be right back after our last break.
Let's get back to talking smack with the side of mac and cheese.
Before we can safely come together, we need the facts on COVID-19 vaccines.
To get the facts, visit getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.
Your ad could be ran here. myjbn.com/support. myjbn.com/support for more information.
Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Watson, Charles Bishop coming in on last segment. Man, shout out to Charles for getting that done, man. I told you, Charles, bad boy.
I appreciate it, Doc. Yeah, you give me the leeway to reach out, so I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Nice.
Yeah, Mike, he's on it, man. We gotta give him some love. You know,
got it done. I got to do a golf thing and tip my. You got to do a golf thing, y'all, and tip your hat.
There you go.
You're right. You're right. I like that because he showed made a good putt right there. North Carolina A&T's Brewer earns academic honors for CoSIDA from the MEACsports.com. North Carolina A&T State senior Eddie Brewer has received recognition on the court as being named the MEAC Player of the Year the last 2 seasons, but last week Brewer received academic recognitions. I love athletes that are stellar on the playing surface, whether that's the court, grass, or gridiron, finds a way to get it done in so many different ways, but also can bring it academically. Check this out, Charles and Mike. 3.83 GPA. That sounds like the GPA Mike had going through the chemical engineering program at Prairie View. I couldn't touch on the 3.8 until I got into grad school and I learned a little more about writing. Undergrad, not so much, but he did the thing there. Let me move on a little bit and see about some other areas. I did want to get into that. MEAC announces the 2021 Nike Postgraduate Scholarship recipients. Big deal from Lamisha Charles and Nihit Rao, both from Morgan State University, 2021 recipients of that Nike Postgraduate Scholarship. But Wednesday, I had a chance to go up to NRG as you had the 2021 Cracker Barrel National Battle of the Bands presented by Pepsi. Sugar zero or sugar free in terms of what's going on there. That's going to be fascinating. 3rd year that it's here. It'll be the 2nd time that they were able to get it off. Obviously, they had to cancel last year with COVID-19 restrictions. They moved it from North Carolina. A lot of good work is being done when you just talk about that kind of work there. So wanted to give a shout out in terms of the work that's getting done there to Derek. And he continues to move the bar. Obviously, a national marketing platform, arm of the SWAC, and you see what's going on with the SWAC. What are your thoughts? You know, Charles, you always talk about the interconnectedness of the culture in so many different ways. You started out with a voice in regards to calling out the halftime show, which is oftentimes when you have both bands, they're the battle of the bands. You have the framework when they march into the stadium. And then obviously people famously know about not just the battle of the bands at halftime, 5th quarter. What do you see going on in terms of this event? I mean, $20,000 is going to the school, as Derek Weber talked about Tuesday in this interview. but another additional $3,000 he's able to bounce up. They're gonna fly some teams in here, put them up in nice hotels. So he's doing this, first class in so many different ways. Being right here in Houston, you as well, Mike. What are your thoughts in terms of, obviously, the city lost, if you would, the SWAC championship game, but now they at least bring back another HBCU platform with the Battle of the Bands. Starting with you, Charles, what are your thoughts on that?
No doubt about it. Houston is open for business. I think we see that. And you see the marriage of the branding of HBCU bands or show bands, if you will, with the corporate community here in the Houston area. So I think, that, and we had Derek Weber on with regards to talking about that. All avenues are open in this regards. And there is a pageantry to the show style bands. Dr. Bill, you mentioned there's an entrance, there's the opening, if you will, the pre-game, then the fifth quarter. So there's so many interconnected components that corporate America is recognizing. I mentioned the PA announcer being an intricate part of the band as well. So it's very exciting to see all this kind of interconnectivity working together.
Yeah, when you talk about all that, Mike, Battle of the Bands, what are your first thing comes to mind? And now it's in Houston. Because I know you quite a few times with family and extended family in Atlanta, get you out there. You have the other side of this with the Honda Battle of the Bands, but now, which is stable in Atlanta. But we've always talked about the marketplace of Houston and what it could be. Do you think this is an emphasis that will bring more HBCU events to the city of Houston, similar to what you kind of see what many people call the Mecca of Atlanta, and how it has not only the Honda Battle of Bands, but now the MEAC SWAC Challenge, the Celebration Bowl, and that's just the Division I part of it, FCS, but you have some of those Division II games. What are your thoughts in terms of Houston being that media capital in this area with the SWAC programs, Prairie View, Texas Southern in this area, and not to mention, as we just talked about, the 5 or so HBCU NAIA programs in this area maybe finding a way to use Houston as a hub. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so you took the words right out of my mouth. We lived in Atlanta for 8 years. And as you mentioned, Dr. Cavil, we attended the Honda Battle of Bands from the point that they first started. And, when you look at the market in Atlanta, you're battling up against so many other different venues. And some of the bands there, you almost expect to see it. Now you're bringing to Houston the marketing approach to be as a textbook class that should be in somebody's MBA program. Because if you look at all of the corporate contributors, not only the title sponsor, Cracker Barrel, but you got Pepsi, HEB, Cricket, Credit Versio, you've got Home Depot, Gillette, Head
Sports Authority.
Yes, Sports Authority. You've got a plethora of corporate support. The other thing is now you're bringing East Coast exposure in the terms of band to Houston, which is a market that wants to see that kind of competition, that kind of HBCU exposure. So it's pretty much the perfect storm where you have great marketing, great concept, great business plan, but you also have the exposure of HBCUs, to be honest, and a part of the HBCU game that a lot of the Houston market has just been wanting to see. And I look for this wheel to keep turning and keep growing and growing. So I think it's the perfect storm. The other thing we talk about is the game between the game. We talk about the entry. We talk about the pageantry. We talk about the dress. But what about the fraternities and sororities? The step shows that happen behind the scenes in the back, on the roads, back there in the back. Now you're going to see great fraternities and sororities stepping probably in the parking lot of NRG, from the East Coast. So you're going to get a different flavor, a different style that the Houston folks have been wanting to see for a while. So again, I think kudos, thumbs up to the way this has been handled. And I look for this event to continue to grow and to be a staple in the Houston community.
No doubt about it. Great points made by both of you all. Our time is up. It happens to us far too often. But as we go out, Howard-Hampton football to be played at Audi Field from HBCU game day. That's a soccer facility, 22,000. I think it's unique. perfect type of venue for that game. I wonder how that will resonate maybe in our area. Obviously, the Labor Day Classic as a home game for TSU is played at BBVA Compass Stadium. And then you have those facilities in Dallas. It'll be interesting to see, is that something that you may uniquely see moving forward? So I did want to kind of get that out there as we come to a close. Charles talked about our Coach Sanders, legendary Nate Newton, Cowboy legend there, all-pro in terms of what took place there. But many thought Dawson Odom left the sweat, maybe not so fast. He was down at the camp making sure that he can do his recruiting, getting in and learning. Kudos to Coach Odom for making it happen. And in addition, he brings up ex-Southern assistant to Norfolk State. So that's fascinating when you talk about Stephen Adams, the defensive coordinator. That'll do it for us. I'm Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Want to say thank you for all and hope you enjoyed us. Thank you for listening to Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends, our colleagues. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports, coming from Inside the Lab, College of HBCU Sports, with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. We hope you enjoyed our interview with the president of the NAIA, Jim Carr. And again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop, every Tuesday and Thursday right here at 6 o'clock Central Standard Time. We look forward to next week as we discuss the latest news in the lab. We'll start stabbing a little bit out of football. It's coming around the corner. It's time to get in there. We've touched on a lot of things. We'll give you a little more, but it's start to playing that up. We might sneak in here and get B.J. Jones, give you a chance. We might find a way to get Carlos Brown in here because we got some big announcements coming. And then we got to make sure we get the pregame show. Neely back on to make sure he gets his spin on it. And lastly, obviously, 1876 Sports and Culture Podcast. Don't be surprised if we got a trip on for them. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. That's Inside HBCU Sports Lab 1 on Twitter, Facebook, Inside HBCU Sports Lab on YouTube, Facebook. Make sure you like, subscribe, get to know us. Dream big, continue to move forward, share with our friends, your friends, all the friends out there. We will talk with you soon. Mike.
Course.
Charles.
Lecture.
Dismiss.